Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Ginge and Pedro show. I am, of course, Mr. Ginge Gingerton, but alongside me is not Pedro Ang this week. Alongside me is nobody, actually. So that's all right. We'll be back next week with my boy Pedro. But we do have an exciting guest here coming up. Just so briefly, I'm tempted to make a pun. Perhaps this is a perhaps my guest in our meeting will fit like a hand in a glove. Ladies and gentlemen, you know him, you love him, Mr. Andy Mitton. You see what I did there, I hope.
I did. I really did, Mark. Thank you for having me.
Yeah,
You
buddy.
brought me back to like when I was in elementary school running for like class treasurer or something. I would have like my sign would have the Mitten. It was like, don't stay out in the cold, vote for Mitten. Brings me back.
I love that, actually. It works.
It didn't work. I didn't get
No?
it. It didn't work.
Damn it. You know what? It was too highbrow, I think. It just went over their heads. Like
they knew better than to elect me treasurer. Nothing's changed. I shouldn't be treasurer of anything.
Very well. Well, that's all right, though. It's a hard job to get sometimes, I think. You're going to get all this responsibility. Do we really want it, truthfully?
No.
So, buddy, how's your day going? How's Andy Mitton doing?
All things considered, pretty good. It's we were just talking. I'm coming to you from Sleepy Hollow, New York. It's cold and wintry, but we're getting through it. But yeah, everything's well. I'm in a good groove of sort of like, with the having the new movie out and kind of handling the release and putting the Blu-ray together and writing the next thing, and it's been good.
Absolutely. Love to hear all that, by the way. I just finished watching the movie. Absolutely enjoyed it, dude. The ending actually gave me chills like 3 times, like 3 legit chills. Like, I guess we'll get to it at the end, and I guess we'll end up spoiling it, just to have a talk about it. But
Okay.
Spoiler cast, if that's all right. I mean, it's up to you. I mean, we could probably talk about it without spoiling it too.
Hey, as long as we're alerting people, let's dig in.
Okay, great. So before we get into that, though, we do have a little bit of a say hello to Pops Van Zandt over here. What's up, Pops? And Andy. There we go. So it's not Mirror World. Hey, Pops. Thanks for coming by, sir. Pops is our producer on the show, actually. He'll be here at the end to help send us off. He's a host. It's comic book nonsense. So anyways.
Love it.
So, buddy.
Hey.
Tell us about your creative journey. You have a lot of titles, and definitely an artist's artist. You're a writer, director, musician, composer. Do you do art as well, like painting? Or
no,
sort of round that off.
No, I'm terrible at that at all. Like I'm no ability as that kind of artist, but it never did. But I tried. I remember actually being young and trying to make comic books. It was like the comic books were certainly a part of my upbringing. But
beautiful.
Yeah, I was like I'm a pure thoroughbred horror person. I was a horror kid. I was like the kid who was like, begging my mom to buy me the Stephen King book I shouldn't be reading when I was way too young. Nice. You end up with a copy of The Dark Half when you're like 9 years old, and that'll open some doors.
Man.
But yeah, it was just sort of pretty much as far as I can remember, I wanted to write. And as a younger person, I probably thought that meant books. And then as a teenager, I got into theater, and I kind of fell in love with playwriting and writing scripts. It just seemed to suit me better because there's like room in a script. There's margins for other people to come in and add their ideas and make it better. And it just felt like collaborative and exciting. So I was kind of running parallel courses as like a fan. I was all horror, all the time, but I was also studying theater, and I went to college for theater. And then moved out to Los Angeles and had a nonprofit theater company in my 20s. And we were a lot of those people I still work with and are parts of these movies. And we were all scheming our way ultimately to kind of take what we had learned and bring it into the horror space, because that's where we really wanted to be. And I just think there's nothing you can't explore, within horror, like in all the subgenres and corners of it there's, I could happily make them my whole life. So, parallel to that, as a musician, I I've had
Mm-hmm.
bands and I've always been writing songs, but I never really wanted to be deep into the music industry. And I'm just not nomadic enough. Like I'm too much of an introvert. Like was never super comfortable on stage with my electric guitar. Um, but as a songwriter, things always came natural. So I have a sort of B career in writing music and lyrics for family musicals. I've done a few out of the Kennedy Center in Washington, and that's been just sort of a fun side project. And on the last
Mm-hmm.
few horror movies, I've brought it into that space too. Being able to score while I edit just sort of has
Right.
created a flow, and I'm a nice cheap hire, so it's all worked out.
Definitely is helpful being able to hire yourself. And
Indeed.
I've noticed you as a you were titled. You wrote the Harbinger, composed it, directed it. Did you make any cameo? Was there like a secret Andy cameo in there somewhere?
No, there was in a rough cut. I like crossed a street from a distance, and then I pretty quickly cut myself the hell out of my movie because no, thank you. Um,
That's all right.
Yeah, there's a short we did a long time ago, Listen My Children, about a song that kills you if you listen to it. It's a part of a movie called Chilling Visions. It was like a TV movie, but that's the only movie I've really made a cameo in. Other than I'll always make a little audio cameo, but I don't tell people where those eggs are hiding.
I see. That's your little secret. Fair
Kind of have a
enough.
few.
Yeah. So I'd like to talk to you about sort of your what was the initial turning point for you as a writer, as a creator? To you said you moved to LA to make movies, and eventually, that was your goal in the long term. But so I guess maybe the question should be a little different then. But what was sort of the initial push for you to really start directing full time as a as a full length director? I mean, like, did you have enough experience, or was it you take the leap, or?
I it, I definitely was into taking leaps when I was younger. I probably, if I could
Mhm,
go back, would garner a bit more experience and try and find a better balance. But
mhm,
I I mean that's sort of I think part of what I'm proud of though about the early works are a result of that, of when you go in sort of like unjaded and willing to break the rules and not knowing that you're not
mhm,
supposed to do certain things, you end up with something sort of original. So Yellow Brick Road, the first feature I did, was that turning point, I think, where it was like we've been doing theater in LA, which is that's a rough go.
mhm,
It's not really a town that's conducive to theater. And
mhm.
around 28, it's a pretty common time to look around and say like, "Oh God, I've got to like, I've got to make my own like gateways, or
Mm,
they won't appear. Like we've got to like make something that's not just a project, that is sort of like something that can change lives." Um, and so Yellow Brick Road became this, that adventure, and it was a classic
mm,
sort of location woods shoot where I thought, are we going to get out of here alive? The making of it was probably scarier than the film itself at sometimes. It was a real, it was that real gateway, and I can.
mm,
It's a hard movie for me to look back on in some ways, but yet it served that purpose. I mean, hell, I'm married, to one of the actors from that movie with kids. It was
all
that
right.
kind of experience where you really you kind of learn what you were made of, and were
Mm,
able to bring it forward, and from there, I mean, I wish I could say at any point I've become a full-time director, but
mm,
that's a hard thing to do. It's been living in this sort of indie world for a while.
mm,
And so the Harbinger is sort of hopefully a bridge builder in a way to ensure it's not another, 3 or 4 years before I get back to set. Then I'll have
mm.
to go do another musical to make the ends meet. Like, this seems to be the turning of a new chapter. That's my hope.
Well, I really enjoyed the Harbinger, just start to finish, man. And I took some notes, just one, and I want to really get into the technical aspects of being a director, and sort of a lot of the behind the scenes, sort of like the demystification of, like, how, because it really is. I'm sure all parts of it is an art form. The art of movie making, the magic of cinema, all that stuff. I'd love to just sort of pick your brain on that. But could you tell
Sure.
us a little bit about how the Harbinger came about, and as a story, and just give us the old
Sure. Yeah.
whatever.
So, I think for a while, I've been wanting to work. I've been wanting to do something in dreams. I just think
Hmm.
dreams and horrors are, it's a fun playground. Um,
Hmm.
and so I had a few ideas swirling around that weren't connecting. And then in 2020, when everything shut down, there was another movie we were hoping to do. It wasn't going to be safe. So out of that sort of desperation of that moment, and and with this, those ideas kind of found a home, because the ideas were technical, but what you're looking for is like an emotional weight. It's something like a thematic thrust to glue everything together. And for me, it was the sort of existential dread of the summer of 2020 when we couldn't see the finish line.
Hmm.
Um, and uh, I knew it was going to be kind of a risk, that there was going to be a desire from escapism from what we were all going through. But I also knew that
Hmm.
if you brought a horror movie forward with the goods of a horror movie and used it as
Right.
the theme, like it fuels the movie, but it is not the movie. The story could exist in another time. So
Hmm.
that's what was important to me. And I have one of those nights where I sort of, over the course of a night of pacing a basement outside of Boston, pretty much the whole machine fell into place in my head.
Hmm.
And it was a fast process. It was, I think I wrote it in August of 2020 and continued on with drafts, but we shot it in February of 2021, just 5 months later. So
Nice.
it had a
Hmm.
lot of, it was easy to inspire people, is what I found. Like, people came aboard, people jumped on because I think they recognized um, that there was some catharsis in it, and
Hmm.
that it was a place to sort of process all of our feelings about what was going on while also making something super fun.
Right. And I actually think you did that pretty well, even though the subject matter, with COVID and everything, people could, want escapism. I could see that. But I really saw it more as a vehicle for the actual, the horror of it itself. I mean, like the Harbinger, you know what I mean? Like that character, sort of, you could sort of see what you were doing there, with the fear, with the existential dread, you know what I mean? That type of,
Yeah,
playing on the fear of everybody being worked up, does create a lot of that, you know, just the feeling of being trapped inside. I think, all in all, it was accomplished very well.
thank you, thank you. I appreciate that.
Could you talk a little bit about the design of the character, the Harbinger, and the inspiration for, just like, uh, sort of what, why, I don't know what type of, I don't know what sort of like character you would, I guess like it's like a twisted Sandman type character, or what do you think?
Yeah. Well, I think of the Harbinger as the designer of dreams. He's like a
Mm.
he looks at each individual person and where their vulnerabilities are, where their fears are, how to sort of exploit their isolation, and
Mhm.
um and designs nightmares based on hollowing them out so that he can become, so they're powerful enough to take them. And that's sort of,
Mhm.
I invented a demon with no real research into actual demonology. I remember there is some, like, I've been in some Q&As where people who are really into demonology will be like, "So tell me about your research," and I totally disappoint them by being like, "I made it up." But that's the fun, we make things up.
Yeah.
And so I liked that. I thought of the plague. The plague doctor I knew was going to be, if I was going to use it, I would have to expand on what was familiar, and it
Mhm.
couldn't be his only way of appearing. So
Mhm.
what I liked about this character is I got to have the mask, and it was a lot of fun to design it with Myung Hui Park was our mask designer,
Mhm.
and we worked we basically worked hard to we chose a bird that had the right, like, beak profile. I think it
Mhm.
was it was the California thrasher,
Nice.
if that matters to anyone. And
Put it in
just
the
sort of,
IMDb trivia.
that's right, that's where it goes. And had the idea that over the course of the movie, look of the mask could change from something you were seeing from a distance and imagined synthetic maybe or mask material, but as you get closer and as the movie goes, you notice it has like organic textures and it more like a bird, like something that can bleed by the end of the movie. So
Right.
that was fun, but almost the most fun was that his he also is every character in the nightmare, and he speaks through those people too. So
Mm-hmm.
that didn't have to be my only source of fear, and I could kind of hold him in reserve and play all the other
Mm-hmm.
games I wanted to play. So that was the idea.
Right, and I definitely, yes, it definitely worked. The part where her mother's tongue turned black, that was.
Yeah.
How did you? What does someone put in their mouth for that? Like, was it just
I don't
ink?
know. She didn't like it. I remember that. She was like she was glad when we got that done, I think in 1 or 2 takes. It was like
Mhm.
um I wish I knew. It's one of those things people, someone showed me, is this what you're looking for? I was like, yeah,
Right.
that's exactly it. But it was practical. There was no VFX on it. It was something black on her tongue.
Very nice. Love
Yeah.
love that. We got Hart Fisher in the chat. We make things up. Love it.
Yes. That's what we do.
AmericanHorrors.net. There we go. Very nice. Um, so yeah, the practical effects. Could you? Is that something you've done historically? Are you a big practical effects type guy? Was there a lot of or any CGI in this movie? I mean, could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, if I had all the resources in the world, I'd be the biggest practical effects guy. That like I've had to be like choosy about where I apply them because I've had
Hmm.
limited resources. But I love practical effects, and I'm a firm believer that even if you're going to add CGI, you have to have a foundation of something
Hmm.
practical. If you're coming out of thin air with CGI, I think audiences, and I know I feel this way, become attuned to sort of catching on to that, and it can pull you out of the story. But
Hmm.
as someone who worships like The Thing,
Yeah. Right. Right.
like those are my touchstones for all that stuff.
Hmm.
So it would be great to be able to do more. But yeah, in this case, we did as much. We always had a practical foundation. Everything we
Hmm.
added at the end of the day was sort of in addition or working on that foundation, or things that hopefully you wouldn't notice or pull you out, but that we were pumping black blood out of that out of that mask at some point.
Hmm.
We were Yeah, I don't think there's anything we did, even when there's a part where you see a body fall from a
Hmm.
ceiling and hit the floor, and so
Right.
the way we obviously weren't going to drop a kid, the 10 feet onto a hard ground. But what we were able to do was drop a whole bunch of plaster. So we weren't making any of that material up. We dropped everything practical, and then we shot
Mm.
him against a green screen with someone like lifting him up and dropping him. So we got the motion of him falling. So everything we were putting together was a
Mhm.
real element. And
Mm.
that's for me, what makes CGI work, and even on these budget levels, which are small, I think
Mm.
that has to be the approach.
That sounds like a lot of fun. I'm gonna be honest with you.
This is a lot
Just
of fun.
having them being tossed up like that. Could you talk a little bit about the budget? What is that something you're sharing? The budget for the movie?
I mean, I would talk about anything, but there may be producers who will not appreciate that I talk.
Hey, absolutely.
Look, I'll say this. It's a micro budget. It
Hmm.
falls in the micro budget scale. So we're nowhere near $1 million. We're not even halfway. We're in that zone. Um,
Hmm. I'll
so
just say this: over here, we're very much in the indie scene too. Everything has to be done, just basically how you described with practical effects. I mean, comic books are obviously different. You don't have the full scale that you do with a movie production, but there is a lot of that, give and take. You have to learn just being an independent guy, not having the arm of a corporation or big funding behind it. So
yep.
absolutely. And also there's a lot of I keep seeing the word micro budget filmmaking. I feel like there's a I don't know if you caught on Hulu. There was this, it was called like minute Huluween or something like that. It was this series I think they did with Blumhouse where it was like 1 to 3 minute shorts, just like a series of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
I loved those, and I think shorts. I'm a big fan of shorts personally, so I got a lot of respect for that.
Yeah. Same here. I haven't seen those yet, but that'll have to be on my list.
I honestly, I think it just seems like a brilliant way to get into filmmaking. I mean, the way they tell stories, you can see some people play with themes, like some people are playing maybe more with technicality, but there's always a good story start to finish. And that's one thing, again, not to bring it back to comic books necessarily, but as you're learning, it's just there's a lot of the fundamentals and stuff that are built in that you want to be able to practice and learn beats and all that stuff. So
Yes.
shorts are great. Yeah, people don't give
Yes.
them enough credit.
I agree. And there's a lot of films being made off shorts now.
Mhm.
Like Smile, that just came out last year, was a short before it was
I
a
really
feature.
enjoyed
And
it.
yeah.
What were some of your favorite horror movies of the year last year?
Oh man, it was a really good year for horror.
It was, yeah.
I mean, I I had a lot of fun with X.
Hmm.
I shamefully haven't seen Pearl yet. It's like we're all backed up here getting through the movies, but
I
I
understand.
enjoyed it. I liked a lot of I liked Smile a lot. I liked Barbarian a lot.
Hmm.
Um, I liked a lot of things I got to see on the festivals, like on the other side of the spectrum, like something like
Mm,
Christmas Bloody Christmas was a lot of fun
right.
for me.
Mhm.
Or
That was a good
um,
one.
yeah, or some of I mean, there have been things that I don't even know if they qualify as horror, but they were horrific experiences that are
Mm,
masterpieces, like Vortex. I don't know if you've seen Vortex, but my God,
mhm,
it's the Gaspar
mm.
Noé movie. Dario Argento stars in it. It's
Really
devastating.
nice. Right
It's
on. Vortex, huh? I'll have to
yeah,
check that out.
it's really good. But yeah, it was a great year. I saw so many things I loved.
Hmm.
So
Very
it
nice.
was a cool year to put a movie out in have it like
Yeah,
in such good company.
absolutely. It was a good year for horror. I'd say I loved all of those that you mentioned, except for Vortex. Obviously, I haven't seen that, but I think maybe my favorite horror movie of the year, and it was a close race between maybe Barbarian and The Black Phone. Really
Mhm.
enjoyed The Black Phone. Scott Derrickson, the director for that, he
Mm.
did Sinister, which is
Yep.
just one of my all-time favorite movies. And yeah, I was really, really pleased with The Black Phone. So
Yeah, I
very
was
nice.
too. I enjoyed it.
We got Hart Fisher back in the chat here. He says, part of why I started American Horror's Film Festival, I dig horror shorts. Hey, hey. All righty. So, Andy, let's talk about the sort of technical side of being a director, and maybe start at the beginning of how to put together a movie for anybody out there who's looking to get into it. What are some of the things that what are some of the obvious, and what's maybe some of the not so obvious?
Well, I come at it from a slightly unique perspective, so maybe that's helpful to one degree. Like there's a lot of directors come through film school and they come through with
Hmm.
uh, this sort of technical viewpoint on things. Whereas since I was coming from theater, and so when we were going out to make our first movie, I knew a lot about how to structure stories, how to tell
Hmm.
them. I definitely knew how to communicate with actors. And I knew a lot about casting. But like I didn't always know if I wanted a 16 millimeter or a 32 millimeter lens on the camera or what that would mean. So I've always had to be honest. That's the first thing when you're when you're a director, and it's hard to learn this when you're young. You have to get good at admitting when you don't know things
Hmm.
and surrounding yourself with the people who allow your strengths to shine and to fill in your weak spots. Communicate your weak
Hmm.
spots, be honest about them to yourself and to others, and then you're in a really good position because they're going to appreciate what your particular angle is. I
Hmm.
do think that in a like at a horror like at any festival, if you're at a festival with movies on a lower budget, usually the thing that makes a movie sort of rise above the movies around it, in
Hmm.
my mind, is always going to be the actors more than any other. You can have no one's going to look for errors in your continuity or anything else if your story's working and the people
Hmm.
on screen have that sort of intangible thing in their eyes that
Hmm.
makes you want to follow them forward. So that to me is so important. And then so much of the job comes down to then what do you say to your actors between takes 2 and 3?
Hmm.
um, are you just being a puppeteer and telling them to go over here and to be more sad and to put their arm up when this moment happens? Or are you
Hmm.
able to talk about their frame of mind, or inspire their ideas, or stop long enough to listen to what their experience of the last take was and let that lead to the next idea. So I think stopping and listening can be really hard when you're on a set that always feels urgent, because sets always feel urgent. It always feels like you don't have enough time. So I think as a director, your job often is to sort of slow it down and be careful. Like, you don't have to be, for me, and I know directors who are type A and like to be the voice on set and be very alpha. I'm a type B. I believe in like a calm center at the wheel, and I let my first AD stress everybody out. That's his job to, like, do the
Right.
wrangling and light the fire under people's asses. That's not how I go about it. So I try and be a steady, calm center, who is creating a fertile environment for the actors, because I feel like they're the most important piece, and then treating everyone on my set like not just technicians or as part of some sort of hierarchy, but we are all storytellers. We are a family. If the best idea in the room comes from the person who just handed me a coffee, that's my job, is to not have all the ideas, but to cull the ideas, to cull them and choose the best ones. And then, give as much credit for them as you can later when they're not yours. But it requires a lot of humility, I think, and collaborative spirit to do well, particularly when you're writing and directing and editing and composing. Like, that's dangerous shit right there. Like, you could so easily get into a vacuum of your own. You just get blinders on and lose your vision. So the more you do, the more you have to tell everyone, hey, if you see my head go up my ass, tell me, help me pull it out, and let's do this together, right? So that was sort of scattered and long-winded. I apologize, but this is hopefully something in there.
No, I definitely appreciate it. Just that for me, and we've had a few directors on, but we haven't really got a lot, deeply into a lot of what you've discussed there, which is, definitely appreciate that. So casting the movie, you said you were using some of your theater friends and former, coworkers, I guess you would call them. Do you call them coworkers, cast members, or?
Sure. Yeah.
Sure.
Coworkers, collaborators, whatever.
Oh, right. What did you fill in any of the gaps, or did you borrow everybody, or did you have to hire some new talent, or could you talk about casting and things like that, looking for the right actor for the role?
Yeah, well, this one was unique, because part of the production plan for the Harbinger was we were going to shoot in New York, and partly because New York's theater community had completely shut down. Obviously, no theaters were open at the time, so all the best actors in the city who would normally be doing a show were home and wanted to work, but wanted to work in a safe place. So keeping as many people from New York as possible kind of settled down the quarantine requirements and just made it safer. So part of it was, Gabby Beans and Emily Davis, I did not know them before the shoot. I was a little, do you know the HBO show High Maintenance? Ever seen that show? It's about like
No.
it's like a bicycle weed dealer who goes around the city. And so every episode will have a new characters, and it's like a tour of the greatest stage actors in New York to watch this show. So I would watch High Maintenance. I've there's like 9 seasons of it, and that was part of where I found some people. But also in New York, we're still learning Emily Davis and Gabby Beans, their names in our community, but in New York, they're known as like 2 of the hottest up and coming actors on the stage. So I was lucky to get them. I have some connections along with my wife, who's in the movie. Laura plays the demonologist over Zoom, and those are my 2 kids running circles around her. So there was that's easy casting. They didn't even have to come to set. But we talked to a lot of like artistic directors of theaters in the city, like who's really exciting right now, and these were the names that came up. So some of the people I'd normally be working with, like Clark Freeman, who is a close friend, who was the lead in my second film, he was out in California and couldn't leave his bubble. He'd probably have been in this movie in another world, but it wasn't safe. So
Right.
we did things differently for this one, but because of that production plan, almost everyone had that theater vocabulary. And the great thing about
Mm-hmm.
theater actors is they're used to learning the entire play. So they come to set and they know like the whole 8-page scene, and you can shoot your master shot and not have to chop it up, or they're never calling line. There's a sort of ethic there that's common, which was cool and useful when you only have 14 days to shoot your movie.
That was actually something that I think maybe I might have picked up on. It was one of my questions and just one of the things I noticed originally. I guess it's not the opening sequence necessarily, but where we meet everybody for the first time after that, and there's that discussion in the kitchen. I felt that you really captured the drama of a discussion there, and it felt like the dialogue was very real. It felt like everybody was actually family, and like even the angles and just it sometimes just indie movies can sometimes I feel like linger on shots for too long, and for me it can kind of I like a little bit more of those like face cuts. You know what I mean? In between,
Yep.
I felt like you captured that well in that opening scene. Could you talk about the other hires there, Lyle and Dad? Were those
Yeah,
guys you had worked with?
please.
Or?
No. And what's amazing about that, so yeah, uh, that's Miles Walker and Ray Anthony Thomas playing Lyle and Ronald, the brother and
Mm,
father of Monique, the protagonist. And they, Lyle, Miles came from my friend Jay, who plays the Harbinger. He had taught him in a
mm,
theater class. He's
nice.
right out of school. And he was like, "You
Mm,
got to see this guy." And he blew everyone out of the water. Ray Anthony
mhm,
Thomas has been a staple in New York theater for a long time. And he's also, you just see him in small parts in movies we all know. Like he's in Jacob's Ladder, actually, which was the touchstone for
mm,
this movie, tonally. So
interesting.
it was just one of those lucky things. They had a ton of chemistry that I had nothing to do with. Like they showed
Yeah.
up and just liked each other, and
Hmm.
all that stuff in the house was the first week of shooting. So
Hmm.
there wasn't a lot of time to get to know it. But that scene in particular was something I fought for, because there were people who
Hmm.
read the script who were like, okay, so we're going to tell a story about a runaway sausage cart for like 4 or 5 pages at the beginning of the movie. And I'm like, yeah, we are, because we have to see
Right.
this family in their groove. And yeah, they're
Hmm.
wiping down their groceries while they're doing it. But the last thing I'm going to do is write dialogue about wiping down groceries. I'm going to show it because it was a
Hmm.
lived in part of what we were doing. But that's not what I'm interested
Hmm.
in. I'm interested in how we were living our lives at that time. And we were finding
Right.
weird blessings with the people we were stuck with. Like we never would have had this time together.
Hmm.
Um, so it was fun to explore that. They caught on, and once we knew the lines, we sort of let them dirty it up and improvise a little
Hmm.
bit and interrupt each other.
Right.
And what it had to be was a really careful piece of blocking, which I love that when it gets that technical, where it's like, okay, I've got 4 grocery bags. Here's what's in bag 1. Here's what's in bag 2. This is when bag 1 goes to the counter, when bag 2 goes to the sink, and then the meat has to come out of this bag and go to the fridge, and it becomes this dance.
Hmm.
And everyone responded to that. So it takes some rehearsal, but everyone's got like a charge. And if you spend those,
Hmm.
3-4 hours getting it right for camera and for blocking, then
Hmm.
it's worth the effort. Because if you've prepped right, you're only going to need the 3 or 4 takes, and you're out. So that was one of my favorite days on set, to be honest, making that scene and seeing them do that dance and seeing it all come together. It was fun.
Yeah. I think it came together really well, and I'd love to just. I know. I almost wish. Did you do, or maybe I guess I'll just ask. Did you do any like handy cam, like documentary, like on the set behind the scenes stuff that we might get to see later on? Or
It's funny, we have very little of it, because we were pre-vaccine pandemic, which meant we were uh, anyone that didn't absolutely have to be in the space was not allowed to be in the space, because it was another person we had to test every morning. And
Mhm.
we were just in that environment, double masking, huge air filters on between takes that you couldn't even talk over. There was a lot of challenges. So now that we're putting the Blu-ray together, which is exactly what I'm doing right now, like this week,
Mhm.
well, we have
All right.
very little, but we do have some extended scenes and deleted scenes and some
Mhm.
interesting things we shot. that we're able to do, and we're putting commentary tracks and stuff in. But
Ooh,
we have a couple
all right.
bloopers, but I always feel weird about bloopers in horror. It's like I'm reluctant to show any of these scenes in like a comic light because I feel like I can't get that out of people's heads afterwards. But there are some funny things that happened.
Right. No, I love that you're doing commentary tracks. It's this will sound silly, but I sort of grew up in a shed in my parents' backyard. Nothing crazy, but it was just the house was full, and so we had this nice shed. Anyways, the internet didn't go out there very well, but I did have a ton of DVDs, and I watched a lot of them with commentary. And just all of a sudden, in like I don't know, 2010 or 12 or so, like commentary tracks seemingly just disappeared. I guess it saves money, but I mean, are you doing a full length or is it just some on scenes or
I'm doing I
what do
mean, I'll always do a full length solo just because like I relate to what you're saying. For me, like commentary tracks, they were sort of my film school. Like there's a few that
oh
were
yeah,
like really changed me. Like Sidney Lumet talking about The Verdict, or P.T. Anderson talking about Boogie Nights, or the whole set of The Social Network was
nice.
amazing.
Mm,
Yeah, I learned so much from that that I it's important to me to include them, and I'm hoping to be able to
very
do an
nice.
extra one with maybe a few of the actors, and we'll see what we're able to do, or maybe my DP. But
Mm,
yeah, it's important to me to like to provide that stuff, and I think now that like we're seeing some of these streamers ditch movies off their licenses, and suddenly we've been gotten used to a world where we can always get whatever movie we want to
hmm.
see that night, and I think that world is going
Right.
away. And so I
I
think
think so. Yeah.
physical media is going to be coming back, and some of these extras and perks will come back with it, I hope.
Yes, I definitely. I've sort of been pushing. It's not necessarily sure if it's a genie bottle I want to open, but sort of like pushing for like the like some sort of like voluntary museum or something to help preserve like the old Warner Brothers and just old cartoons. Just stuff
Yeah.
that once they're gone or just been have been removed because somebody doesn't want to share. It's like that's fine. We don't have to take it from them, but anybody that wants to donate, you know, sort of priceless relics to this museum. I think that would be great because if this stuff does get destroyed in a fire or something, you know what I mean? It's like just sadly gone. So
It
big
would be
fan of
devastating. Yeah.
yeah. So let's talk a little bit about your inspirations. You mentioned Jacob's Ladder. I haven't seen that one,
Oh,
so
you
I'll
have to
definitely
see Jacob's
check that
Ladder.
one
My
out.
God, that's like I don't think it's maybe 90, it's mid 90s, but it's
All
amazing.
right, it's my jam. Love '90s movies. Who are your who were? It's always so hard to say who's my top five, but if you had to pick five, roughly there about who are your who's your Mount Rushmore?
Directors?
Yes,
All
or
right.
writers, whatever.
All right. Yeah, I mean, I mentioned Sidney Lumet. Sidney Lumet is probably at the top of the mountain for me, just because I adore Dog Day Afternoon and Network, and Before the Devil Knows You're Dead. Even when like before he died, he was making incredible films. I'm a huge fan of the Coen brothers. Um, I'm a huge fan of P.T. Anderson. Those are sort of outside of horror, but within horror, it's always been Stephen King, certainly John Carpenter, certainly George Romero.
Mhm,
Um,
mhm,
I I mean, I really am into sort of the A24 movement. Like I think Ari Aster and Rob Eggers, who I worked with on my first feature. I'm always rooting for Rob. I love Rob. He's such a good
very
guy, and
nice.
he was fun to work with. So those are kind of two I follow, you know,
Mhm,
currently. But yeah, in terms of like who started me going, I mean, it was it really, most of it was outside of horror, even though I was consuming so much of it as a fan. The
mhm,
directors or the people who were like crafting it, like I usually would venture outside because I think it's fun to
mhm.
take those influences, into horror.
I agree, and I'm a lot like that myself. I love other, I love lots of directors outside of horror, but I'll just spend a long time on horror binges. But you do kind of need to come up for air every now and then.
Yeah,
And for me,
yeah,
I love just a well crafted story. Just things like that.
Yeah. Oh,
Um,
sorry, I can't go
okay,
forward. I can't believe I didn't say William Friedkin and Brian De Palma. Those are important names for me too.
right, Brian De Palma.
Yeah.
I've actually been a bit on a Brian De Palma kick here lately.
Oh,
Um,
really?
watched Scar. Yeah, I'm trying to. It's escaping me now. Scarface, Black Dahlia Murder. Started Blowout, but didn't finish it. There's a few others I've watched here. I'm just like the streamers have had. You have to like sift through them. Even Tubi's got some really like kind of classic
Yeah.
films on there. But yeah,
Yeah.
Tubi actually you could survive off of Tubi and YouTube movies. I think like there's a lot of
Totally.
interesting free stuff on there. But very nice.
Yeah, those are good. Those are good De Palma selections. I think Carlito's Way is like my little secret.
Right,
Like
oh, dude.
I forget how good that is, and then I put it back on. I'm like, oh my God, it's incredible.
Dress to Kill. That was the other one.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. It's a classic one. Okay, so I'm trying to think. Oh yes, I wanted to talk to you about because being an indie guy myself, and specifically not where I come from in the indie field. I guess anybody in the indie field trying to. You either decide at some point you're either going to try to make it within, like break through, or you just kind of decide I'm going to go around and create how I want to create regardless. Um, could you sort of talk about sort of the in your best view, what are some of the new and up and coming ways to market and produce and help fund your movies? Not your movies, but movies going forward. Being do you guys have like a secret indie directors chat room where you guys are like, ooh, this is interesting? Are you looking at kickstarting things? Like what's up and coming on that field?
Well, I mean, um, I believe in the lower budget spaces. I've been working in, like, I've gotten to know that
Mm,
that area pretty well, and I know basically what I've learned as a producer, among other things, is like reach for what you can grab. Like if you have a small amount of money, that's wise because you have a chance to make it on the other side, particularly in
mm,
horror. Like the first thing I say to anyone is like work in horror if you can, because there's no better community. There's no warmer, more passionate, more organized
mm,
community in film. And it's one of the few spaces now where you don't need to have Channing Tatum in your movie to have a shot at making
right.
your money back. But realistically, if you don't,
Mm,
and you're and you end up spending $1 million, you're probably not going to make that back. So some degree of
mm,
realism is important, and looking at what you have and letting creative restraints inspire you, and not,
mm,
I hear people sometimes, and I totally get it. That's just like, yeah, don't let anything restrict you when you're writing, or like, just go, like,
mm,
do the thing you want to see. And I get that, but I don't think that's worked for me necessarily. I think when it's worked, it's been like, understand what you have to work with and how you're going to get this made, and
mm,
do the thing that makes sense to do under it. So I get known a little bit for these slow burn atmospheric horror movies, but part of the
mm,
reason that's my body of work is because I think we've been wise as a team as to like what makes sense. And if you're going to make something really kinetic with a lot of action sequences that require 15 shots over the course of a minute of film or whatever to pull it off, like you don't
mm,
have time, and you don't have the money for that. And so now I'm in a place where I think I know the limitations of this space. I know that it works up to a point, but like it's really now this next tier that even studios
mm,
are looking at, this $1 to $5 million. Um, what I see in Hollywood is that a lot of people, like us, who grew up on the things we grew up on and have come out of indie spaces, are
mm,
now sitting in some of these companies,
mm,
and are starting to get their hands on the levers, and they want to take people like, you see people like Rob Savage or Patrick Bryce, or people being kind of taken from this indie space and allowed to be themselves,
mm,
on this next tier. And a studio taking a bet, for a couple $1 million on someone like that is doable for them. But for me, that's going to feel like paradise. Like, oh my God, like, think I can afford a Steadicam for more than a day. I think of what I can do. So I think that, the tier I've sort of been on is great for breaking through and mastering your crafts. And what's changed is, studios are now more savvy. Even the smaller boutique companies are savvy to like that mid tier, that next tier up, that that where you're going to have resources, but it's not like you suddenly have to check a bunch of boxes and you contort yourself into something that you're not in order to make it work. And I'm just finding more kindred spirits in seats of power than I ever knew, 10 years ago, when everyone was telling me like, yeah, this is a great script. Can you put aliens in it? Can you do this? Can you do that? And it's just like, I never knew how to bend myself into those shapes. So I spun my wheels for a long time.
It's like, the bird is great, but can you make him a werewolf?
Exactly.
Do you experience that a lot? I mean, or earlier on, was there a lot of that? And how does something like that not blow up? You know what I mean? How does somebody handle that? The pushback.
I mean, when you're young, you don't know when you're grateful for opportunities, or to have that agent or have that manager, or to be sent into that room. So you do try and bend yourself. But I think that when you, I think that at the end of the day, you have to be honest. Like, it's like we were talking about with directing. You have to be honest with yourself and others, even if you really, really want the job, at what you're really going to be able to do. Or like, I found that my muse, like, I would gratefully in a room with someone in a meeting take that ridiculous assignment because I wanted to work. It's like, all right, I'll put aliens in it, damn it. But later that night when I went to do it, it wouldn't happen. Or if it happened, it was bad. And so learning to just like say no to some things that it's hard to say no to, or recognize that, like, yes, this person is powerful, this person could help me, but we don't see storytelling the same way. So let's not spend 5 years pretending we do. Let's wait for the people. And my process on the Harbinger speaks to this, because it's XYZ Films that's taken the movie, and these guys are like, whether or not it's a good day or a bad day, or something goes wrong or something goes right, they're not across the room from us. They're next to us. They're like looking us in the eye. They're people I'd want to hang out with, who understand, like, it's just never quite felt this way. And the more you feel that in a room, that sense of ease, the more you catch yourself being yourself around someone else. You should probably follow that road, is what I say.
I like it. Yes, there's a lot to say about that with comic books too. Like, the collaboration as a writer, when you hand it off to an artist, the way they visualize it, just even if you write it word for word, I mean, it still might not be what they're seeing. But and some people demand you do it their way, the way it's wrote, and others, let your artist go and do their thing. Perhaps they could tell, just being the visual side of the equation, they probably have a better understanding. And really, communication, like, if it's like a pacing issue, you just have to communicate. And so absolutely. So what about distribution, and like, is there like plans for Shutter or anything like that going forward? Do you have any
So here, at least in North America, XYZ will, they have this period now where it's released, so it'll be another couple months probably of this window where it's rentable and purchasable, and then they'll sublicense it to a streamer. And I'm not sure yet if that'll be Shutter, if that'll be Tubi, or if that'll be what, but it will spend then some time there. And once that happens, there'll be a burst of like a lot more people seeing it, which will be great. But they, that's what's been cool about the process being collaborative. Like, I'd say we're putting the Blu-ray together with them now, and they're like letting me handle the art and like the liner notes and I've never been allowed anywhere near this part of the process. Cool. Like, it gives me the feeling that we're going to take care of it together. And there's great people taking care of it overseas as well. So we just had our UK release a couple weeks ago, and
awesome.
It's been nice to see that too, because I've gotten to travel some cool places on this movie, and I really wanted to get, part of the idea was like, we all, like, the well of dread that this movie taps into is like a global thing, which is rare. So it's like, I really want, it's been cool to like go to Finland, for instance, and see them having the same experience as they do in Colorado, because we all had this experience together crazily.
Right. Absolutely. And I think one of the shares we had for the episode on Twitter was from a person from the UK. So
there you go.
You got a fan over there. Hooray.
Yeah.
Very nice. So we're getting close here to the hour mark on the show. So before we I wanted to play the trailer before you left, but before we get to that, is there, could you talk a little bit about what you're working on the Blu-ray? Are you writing anything behind the scenes going forward? You got the gears turning for the next project, or?
Yeah. There's a lot of lines in the water right now. I'm pretty jaded at this point, so I won't name anything too specifically for fear it will disappear from out from under me. But I'm always writing. It keeps me sane. I write every night, and I'm currently working on a kind of psychedelic horror story, kind of exploring that realm, which is new for me. And I've got a found footage movie set in a small airplane that I'm working on as well, because I like horror in the sky. I've always wanted to go there, so we'll see. But there's a cosmic horror thing that's in development with XYZ, and that we're looking for partners. And I've got a stack of scripts. Honestly, I've got my take on a slasher. I've got like this high-rise horror thing. I try and visit every little every corner of horror, every subgenre. But like we were saying before, how I feel like, we've been making these slow burn movies. If I can get this next tier up and there's like resources around me, there are these other scripts I've been holding in reserve for that moment. So hopefully I can kind of explore more of that potential and make some things that are more kind of sensory and kinetic and exciting, and have some more blood and action and all that.
All right. Love the sound of that. And I really did enjoy the movie. And once it gets out, we have, I believe we have the all your links in the episode description.
Cool.
But I'm sure once it gets out to streaming, it just gets out more in front of people. You're gonna have some. I'm sure you had some great feedback from it, but I'm sure you'll be getting more. So,
thank you,
Andy. Thank you for joining us today, man. I really appreciate it, bro.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks for having me. Thanks for the support. And you guys clearly have an awesome show here. So I'll look forward to being a viewer.
Hey, we're having Kyle Edward Bell, I believe his last name is.
Skidamering.
The director.
Terrific.
Right. Yeah. He's coming on in a couple weeks. So, stay tuned for that if you like. But
for sure. Yeah.
We're going to be hopefully having some more directors on, and just trying to get into the old magic of the film business here. So definitely appreciate your time, Andy. I'm gonna go ahead and you're free to go, because we've got a couple ads and stuff that we play here. So
all right.
Thank you for your time, sir. And we'll see you around.
Thank you, Mark. Take good care.
Bye-bye. You too. All right, gang. Well, we survived. Hooray. Benjamin Soto, great interview. Thank you, buddy. Thank you for coming by. Hart Fisher, thank you for coming by, sir. And good show, Ginge. I could not agree more, Ginge. Well done. No, thank you, Pops. Okay, gang, I made it. I survived. Whew. All right. This show is hard to do by yourself. I'm just kidding. But all right, Pops, if you want to hop in and send us on our way. I do want to thank again our guest, Andy Mitton, for coming on in and rocking out. Let's see here. Trying to find my schedule. See who we have next week. We have one more guest before Kyle coming on. But I can't get my schedule up. Pops, where you at? I'm dying up here. I'm getting the flop sweat, man. The flop sweat. Help me out.
I was just waiting for you to get done talking so I could start playing ads.
I've just I'm just dying, waiting for you to get me the hell out of here. Pops, hit the ads, man.
Yeah, that was a great show. You guys check out all the stuff. I'm gonna play the ads. Ginge, good show, bro. Peace out, everybody.
The doctor is in, baby. This is Doc Blaylock, and you're watching the Madness Comic Network.
Comic Books for Kids provides comic books to kids in hospitals and cancer centers across the U.S. It's a place where we can all work together to make sure every child has a comic book. 100% of all proceeds go towards the kids. It's about making a difference, and while they're in the hospital, allowing them to fly like a superhero, battle dragons, or rescue teddy bears. We are in every state in the country and now support over 160 hospitals.